Welcome back. 536. I think it's fair to say artificial intelligence and the need to adopt it across multiple industries in this country and government as well has never been more in focus than it is right now under our new Prime Minister, Mark Carney. And to that end, Canada now has its first ever AI minister. His name is Evan Solomon, and he is on the line. Evan, thank you so much for being, I should say minister, thank you so much for being here.
Well, first of all, good to be back. How are things? How's everybody? I miss the old conversations, and it's fantastic to be in Montreal on a really important day.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that first, and then we'll come back and talk about what it's like, doing what you're doing. You're in Montreal. You launch an investment of nearly how much? $100 million? What's this about?
Yeah, so nearly $100 million, and I want people to know this is done through something called Scale AI. And what the government does is we want to build in this crisis. Look, we all know we're in an economic crisis. And we all know that we got to build the economy of the future. And in order to do that, we need to invest in the people who are taking risks and building the economy of the future. And Montreal is a absolute center of innovation and entrepreneurship. So we had Startup Fest in the morning where you saw some of the best, coolest, most successful startup companies in Montreal. And then we went to Scale AI and we announced projects of close to $100 million in 23 different companies. And what these companies are doing are building the economy of the future. They're using AI to drive productivity, to create new jobs. And I can tell you something. I just finished touring a place called Hypertech. This is a company in Montreal that has been 40 years in the making. And they are a global leading data center company. So what people may not know is the world is coming to places like Montreal and Canada, but we need to support those companies to use AI, and that's what we invested in today. And we are really proud to do that because we need to invest in the economy of the future, especially right now, to keep jobs in Canada.
I mentioned, of course, the Prime Minister has made a very, regular point of bringing this up and talking about how important it is. And it's worth mentioning as well, certainly given what the story was this week about cuts that are being demanded by the public sector, by the Prime Minister. How is AI going to play out, Evan, just in terms of the government itself using AI?
Look, the government's got to walk the walk. We can't ask industry to use AI to find productivity, to create new jobs, and not use the tools ourselves, and we are using them. The government has to be as efficient as anyone else. The citizens, the voters, people listening, people in their cars right now. By the way, I'm in traffic just like probably half the people listening to you right now. But people want to make sure that our government is lean and efficient. And using the tools of AI is part of that. But you've got to first get the infrastructure right. And I just want people to recognize that, using AI is a tool that's useful if it's driving productivity, if it's making your business better, if it's helping people do their jobs in a better way. You have to adopt it for a purpose. And sometimes there's barriers for small, medium-sized businesses, most of our businesses. I'll give you an example. That's why earlier this month, we announced something called the Compute Access Fund. That means that anybody listening who works in a small or medium-sized business, they may need to say, well, I'd love to use AI, but I don't have access to compute that can use it. Well, this fund allows companies to apply to get access to use that AI so they can see it in action. So the government's got to do that. Companies are doing that. And this is part of this age of the entrepreneur, that inside big companies and outside, these are just tools that are needed and being used to drive the economy of the future. And that's really what the AI is all about. And that's why the Prime Minister made a new ministry, the Minister of AI and Digital Innovation, so we can use these tools in the service of Canada and Canadian jobs.
I heard, I think it was Harley Finkelstein at Shopify a while ago, suggest that, governments, and Mark Carney was not at the time the Prime Minister, but just in general, the governments were not necessarily promoting business. So like Shopify is a major global player. And the complaint was, we're too conservative in promoting these sorts of Canadian businesses. Is that something that's going to change under you?
Yeah, and full disclosure, I know Harley Finkelstein very well, and he's a brilliant entrepreneur. and he's driving the age entrepreneur. Shopify is a crown jewel in the Canadian firmament of innovation companies, and he's 100% right. Part of what Mark Carney wants to do is support people that take risks, support innovators. I spent the first 10 years of my life building a company as an entrepreneur, and I really appreciate how hard it is, the risks it takes. These are people who are betting, their families are along for this risky ride for them, and it is difficult. And we've got to support the people who are building the companies of the future. And the only way to do that is to make sure that they've got access to the right tools. And it's 2025, and many of the tools you need to build are AI. And that's why we're driving this kind of adoption.
I would ask one other thing. We talk about, Canada and the fact that we're conservative and that we have to sort of get over that and actually push this. Do you think Canada can be a global player on the AI stage?
Yeah, you know what? I think you've raised a great point, and I'm super glad you did. I actually think the perception of Canada as risk-averse is not true. If you look at Montreal, look at Quebec, it was founded by risk-takers. It is founded, the Northwest Company is a risk-taking, disruptive company in the fur trade. Canada's history is of people who have fought against big barriers to build one of the greatest countries in the world. So we are risk-taking, we are entrepreneurial, we are innovative. Just think about AI, the three great godfathers of AI, right here, Yoshua Bengio and Mila at the Institute here in Montreal that we're so proud of. Geoffrey Hinton in Toronto at Vector, who won the Nobel Peace Prize. I mean, Yoshua Bengio won the Turing Prize. That is like the Nobel Prize of AI. And in Alberta as well. So, this idea that Canada is not ready to be the innovators, we're not just ready. We are the innovators. We are leading. The challenge is not to be innovators. The challenge is to keep the innovation in Canada and to grow it. That's what our mission is in this digital revolution, this AI revolution.
So a lot of the issue has been as well, the idea in the past that, there's been too much bureaucratic red tape. And I know that's been talked about as well as something that has to change. Is that changing? How hard is that going to be to change?
Well, look, I think the Prime Minister's been pretty clear that we've got to simplify. Part of my job as well is, one of the reasons why I talked about that Compute Access Fund, to give companies access to the possibility that they can use this technology, is because we need to tell our story and communicate in a simpler, better way. And you're right. We've got to cut red tape. The Prime Minister's done that. I think people recognize that on July 1st, when he broke down all federal barriers to interprovincial trade, making good on that Came Promise, that was one of the first times we've seen on a very big level a prime minister that's saying, yeah, we can cut through red tape. We can get things done. And prime ministers have tried to do that for generations, and he did it by July 1st. I think you're seeing provinces work together in a way they never have, partly because of his leadership, partly because of the crisis we're in, partly because we all know we need to do that. So you're 100% right, and I think we've seen the best example of that on July 1st, and you'll see a lot more of that.
Evan, when we talk about this $100 million today that is going to be invested here, what's the breakdown in private and public here? Because people say it's one thing for the government to spend the money, but private industry has to be here, private investment has to be here. Are you seeing that? Yeah,
great question. Every dollar that Scale AI, which is our AI cluster, invests in a company, they get $2 invested by the private markets.
Okay.
So literally, it's a 2-to-1 ratio. You're putting $1 in, and that's just the beginning of the multiplier. Then 100%, you get $2 in on private investment, but then you get multiples. Jobs are created, spin-offs are created. So what you're doing is you've got to create that flywheel of innovation. That's what any great country is doing. They're trying to create these clusters and these where you have enough of an ecosystem that it starts generating more jobs. So that's why the core investment here, and I want to make sure people understand this. This isn't Oprah. No one's giving away money. These companies that apply for this money go through a rigorous diligence process. I spoke to a company today that went through 8 months. They applied, they were rejected. They reapplied, they were rejected. They reapplied because they had to get the diligence right. We have teams of engineers at Scale AI going through these proposals to make sure that they're rigorous, they have application, and they're driving real results and investment.
Evan, just as a final question, I'd be remiss, obviously, if I didn't bring up the elephant in the room, which is the United States and tariffs, and of course, digital services tax was an issue a couple of weeks ago. How much? I mean, and you don't really know how this is going to play out because Donald Trump can change his mind and has from Monday to Tuesday. How much of a potential problem does that pose, and what sort of factors have been addressed so far?
It's no secret that we're living in a moment where we have a political realignment going on. Like, we see it every day. I mean, just look at your social media. And you said it really well. The United States is still our biggest trading partner, but in many ways, it's significantly less reliable than it once was. The Prime Minister's very first trips overseas were to France and the UK. Why? Because we got to drive in new trade partners. And we have to make sure that we're less reliant just on one trading partner. So, yeah, for sure that's driving a lot of this. And that's framing this crisis that we're in, which is we can no longer just be passive about our trade and our economy. We have to build an economy with other countries that share our values. And I've said, our mission here is AI sovereignty. If you are not building the AI economy of the future, if you're not on that bulldozer, you're part of the road. So we've got to invest in it and build in it. And that means new partnerships. I will say that, I'll give you an example. In Quebec, right here in Montreal, you had 250 Canadian companies, many from Montreal, I think more than 100 from Quebec or more, in France at the largest AI conference in Europe. Canada was the country of the year. I went over there. Scale AI did it as well. And Canadian companies were doing business across Europe. And you saw that to expand our trade because the situation in North America is changing. And we better get off our butts and make sure that we're trading with the rest of the world. The good news here is when people around the world see Canadian innovation and companies, you wouldn't, I've seen it with my own eyes, it's world leading, it's world class. And we have this opportunity, we cannot lose it. So we've got to double down on our leadership in this sector around the world. And that's what we got to do. And that's part of my mission. And that's part of why I'm here to meet the companies and the innovators that are doing that, and we need to invest in them to make sure that they've got the opportunity to capitalize. That's how we're going to build an economy for everyone in the future.
Evan, I'm going to let you go, but I'm going to ask you to just take off your ministerial hat for a second. I mean, let's face it, people will know you. We talk on the air. You've been a journalist for many, many years, and now all of a sudden you're Minister of AI. What's that transition been like for you? You wake up and hit yourself and go, am I dreaming?
You know what? It's a great question, and first of all, I love our conversations, and the audience at CJAD has been so incredible. But I had been working in the United States, and when Trump came in, I realized it was time to come home, and I really believe that we had the right leader at the right time in the right fight, and I had the opportunity to come home and try to throw my hat in the ring because I saw right up close, living in the United States, what was going to happen, and it was time to stand up with Canada. And I will tell you, millions and millions of Canadians feel the same way. It crosses partisan. It doesn't matter how you vote. Canadians are standing up for this country and building this country, and it's a unique moment in our history. And you and I have been covering stuff like this for many years. I don't know if I've ever seen a moment where the entire country recognizes what's at stake, and we've all got to lean in and get into the fight. And it is uncorking an optimism and a resilience and a toughness and a gutsiness that has always been here, but I think now we're seeing it for the first time really out loud. And I think it's why I jumped into the ring, and I being in this fight with Canadians has been one of the most rewarding experiences of my life. I have 2 kids, so you got to,
Yeah, perspective. Yeah.
Perspective on it.
Evan, I want to thank you so much for the time. First of all, I'm thrilled for you. I think it's wonderful, and it's great to know you. You're going to be out there and you're going to be implementing change. I wish you the best of luck. I hope we can chat again.
Yeah, anytime. Always love our conversations, and you're going to grill me like you've grilled everyone else, so I always appreciate it. Thanks, man.
Evan Solomon, our Minister of Artificial Intelligence. Really appreciate the time.